We all take on several identities in our transaction in the world, and the identities follow a hierarchy. For example, if you speak about Indians, I belong to a particular state, I belong to Karnataka, I am a Kannadiga. So it has its own culture, language, whatever. So I have an identity of being a Kannadiga. At the same time, I have an identity of being a Bharatiya, an Indian. If you extend it a little more, I am just a human being who belongs to this world. If you extend it a little more, I am just a living being. So your identities have a hierarchy, the more specific ones to the most general ones. Now if you take the simpler example of state and country, I am a Kannadiga and as well as a Bharatiya. Which of these two identities should take precedence over the other? Which one should be prominent than the other? So when I say I am an Indian, does it mean I am not a Kannadiga? I don't have to give up my smaller identity for me to take up a bigger one, because the bigger one includes the smaller one. See, when we speak of opposites, for example, day and night are opposites. But if I ask, what is the opposite of finite? Now, finite and infinite are opposites, but there is a difference from the day and night example. Day and night are opposites, at the same time they are exclusive also. They are mutually exclusive. Day and night will not come in the way of each other. If you say day, that means there is no night. If you say night, there is no day. But when you speak of finite and infinite, they are opposites, but they are not mutually exclusive. The moment you move towards infinite, it contains finite within it. It is not exclusive of finite. It has just extended. But it has become an opposite. In linguistics, infinite has become an opposite of finite. And if I have to give another example, what is the opposite of specific or particular? General. Now when you say general, it is an opposite of specific, but it is not mutually exclusive. It does not exclude specific things. All the specific things together comprise the general thing. All the specific states together make up India, the general entity. All countries together make up the world, the general entity. So now, which identity takes precedence over what decides how spiritual you are, or how expansive you are, or how elevated you are? Most people are stuck in some specific identity or the other. And for that sake, they will give up the bigger identity. In your body also, a cell in some part of the body has a smaller identity. It identifies itself with a particular organ, then it identifies itself with a particular organ system, then it identifies itself with the whole body. Now, if the cell identifies itself with the body more than it identifies itself with the specific organ, it is a healthy cell. It is in tune with the system, it is working in tune with the system. But if a particular cell's identification with a particular organ or a particular small tissue or whatever, if that becomes more prominent and if it forgets its identity with the body, that we call in medical terms as cancer. If its identity with more specific constructive identity has become more stronger than its general identity, that we call as cancer. Now it is working more for that particular organ, and it has lost touch of the bigger reality. It is no more working in tune with the body. It is, see, cancer means it's your own body part working against yourself. Meaning the particular set of cells have gone into a delusion, they have become so constrictive, restrictive, constipated, or whatever. Their identification with one particular part of the body is now so strong, they are working for only that. They don't want to work in tune with the bigger system. So in this hierarchy of identities, there is always hierarchy of identities. There is never one single identity, one against the other. There is always a hierarchy. Just I gave the example of state, country, world, and then just a being. There is always a hierarchy. How much spiritual you are depends upon how restrictive or how expansive you are in your identities. If your identity with your country has taken precedence over your identity of being a human being, you are not spiritual. You may be a patriot, but you are not spiritual. You can take it one step ahead. I am considering human being as a general identity now. You can extend it one step further. Human being is just a living being. So, if your identity of being just a living being takes precedence over all other identities, you have become more spiritual. So being spiritual only means which of your identity is more strong. If you look around now or in history, people who do absurd things, people who commit horrendous acts, they have more specific identities. They have more constrictive identities. Hitler was ready to kill the whole world for the sake of Germany. He was a patriot, no doubt. He was an extreme patriot. But his identity with his being German took so much precedence over being a human being that he was ready to kill all other human beings. Whenever your specific identification takes precedence over the general one, you will become an asura. This verse says, according to yoga, what is Daivi, what is Asuri? There are no hundreds of different things according to yoga. One that this is all Daivi, this is all Asuri. The simple definition of good and bad in yoga is that if something is restricting you, if something is constipating you, that is Asuri. If something is elevating you, if something is expanding you, that is Daivi. Daivi sampad vimokshaya nibandhaya asuri mata. If something is restrictive, that is asuri. That is the simple definition of good and bad. If your identifications have become more and more constrictive, that is asuri. Meaning, if it has taken precedence over the parent identification, if my identification of belonging to a particular state has taken precedence over my identification of being Bharatiya, I have become an asura of one level. It depends on what level you do it, that level of asura you will become. So how much constipated you are will decide how much asuri you are, because only constrictive identities will make you perform horrendous acts. Now it doesn't, when you take on the most general identity and that is very strong in you, it doesn't mean that the specific ones are negated. Fundamental identity, that of a living being, is all inclusive. It does not negate me being an Indian, it does not negate me being a male, it does not negate me being of a particular community, it does not negate it. So, in spirituality, we are not doing one against the other, we are just looking at expansion. We are looking at an expansion of the boundaries. We are not doing one against the other, we are not doing day against the night. We are doing finite to infinite, we are doing specific to general. We are doing Kannadiga to a living being. It doesn't mean that I will stop being a Kannadiga, I will still be a Kannadiga, but my identity of living being will take precedence over it. In Mahabharata, when Krishna goes to Kaurava Sabha for making the peace deal with Dhritarashtra and co, D company. Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, Dushasana, D company. the original D company. So when Krishna goes there to strike a peace deal with that D company, he makes the statement. This is a very famous verse in the Mahabharata. It comes in 2-3 places, but in one place Krishna himself tells us. He says, it's just one verse, it's a compressed verse. He says, for the sake of the welfare of a family, you can give up an individual. For the sake of the welfare of a town, you can give up a family. For the sake of the welfare of a kingdom, you can give up a town. For the sake of the welfare of the world, you can give up a whole kingdom. Meaning, if the kingdom has gone rogue, you have to give it up. Just like in the body, if some organ goes rogue, you cannot do anything. They will amputate it. The medical system doesn't do anything. They will just amputate it. For the welfare of the whole body, they will simply amputate it. He was telling Dhritarashtra that your whole dynasty is in danger, but if you simply give up Duryodhana, your whole family will be saved. Simply do it. Don't think that it is bad or good. You have to think in terms of hierarchy. For the sake of the general entity, you have to give up specific entities sometimes. So this is the simple idea of being spiritual. Being spiritual means your fundamental identities have taken precedence and they have become stronger than your specific identities. That is all spirituality is. You have become more liberated. There is an internet portal called Quora, question answer portal. There was a question recently. The question was, why hasn't a Bengali become a prime minister in a long time in India? So one of the answers, a very good answer to that was, a Bengali has not become a prime minister because a Bengali cannot become a prime minister, nor can a Kannadiga become a prime minister, nor can a Marathi become a prime minister. Only an Indian can become a prime minister of this country. If you are specific, simply what I'm pointing at is, what the answer was pointing at is, if a person's regional identity is more stronger in him than his being an Indian, he cannot become a prime minister because he cannot appeal to the whole country. If his identity of his state is very strong in him, if he is more identified with his state, how can he become the prime minister? He cannot. Only if his identity of being an Indian takes precedence over his state, only then he can become a prime minister. Only if your general identity is very strong, your perception will be straight. It will no more be skewed. If you are very much identified with your gender, whatever you speak will necessarily be skewed. Think about it. When you no more have boundaries for your identities, all specific identities have boundaries. The most general identity, it doesn't have a boundary. If I say I'm simply a being, it doesn't have a boundary. It is all inclusive immediately. Yogis don't belong to a particular country, they belong to the whole cosmos. They think in terms of the whole cosmos. And therefore people misunderstand them sometimes. They think that they are not patriots. But what has happened is, their identification with the country has become smaller for them. Their identification with the cosmos has taken precedence. That's all that has happened. This misunderstanding, for example, happened in Vietnam when there was war going on a few decades ago. The Vietnamese monks, they took neither side. And Vietnamese people misunderstood it. The Buddhist monks in Vietnam, they refused to take sides. They said both sides are wrong, both sides are constructive, both sides are taken on specific identity and there is a clash. And they refused to take sides and therefore the Vietnamese people themselves mistook them and there was so many things that happened, so many horrible things that happened there. So yoga simply means this. It doesn't mean giving up one for the sake of another. It is not exclusive. Yoga means an inclusive process. It is not giving up something for the sake of something else. Thank you.